After about 9 months of ownership, I'm selling my 2022 Benelli TNT 135. Let's go talk about why. Hey everybody, it's Charlie from Daily Motor, and I've had this Benelli for just under a year, and it's never sparked the fizz the way that my Honda Grom did. I expected a little bit larger motor, a little bit more horsepower, a little bit larger size, that this would be a good replacement for the Grom, and I was thinking, well, you know what, it's cheaper, and the Hondas, you're just playing that Honda tax. Why does it need to be more expensive? The Benelli provides everything and more at a lower price point, but the refinement elements are not there compared to the Honda. Let's go for a quick ride. First things first, saddling up here on the TNT. That's another thing, is I never really know what to call this. I actually usually just call it the Benelli or the Nelly, but it's not as fun as saying the Grom or the Grom Eater or anything like that. The seating position is not as comfortable, and Nathan mentioned this as well, my brother, that your knees are pretty regularly hitting this front plastic bit, even as a 5'10" person here. There are elements of riding it that are more exciting than the Grom. The motor makes its power much differently than the Honda motor. It makes it all up top. So you really got to wring it out before you're getting any meaningful power. It's very different from the Honda motors, where there's a low gruntiness down low and you really don't need to wring the engine out to get going. I do appreciate the quick steering of the Benelli. The way the rake is of the front fork, every way the bike is built and engineered, it makes for a snappier, more jittery feel to the bike, and I actually kind of appreciate that. I don't really want a settled-in, calm feel when it comes to my mini bike. A lot of people like the looks of the Benelli better than something like the Grom. In fact, a lot of people think it looks quite cool, and there are aspects of the appearance that I do appreciate, such as LED turn signals. Right there, if you can see, LED turn signals and LED headlights. Let's hop off, take a look here real fast. In fact, you even have a hazard switch, which is not something you get on most bikes. So you can see very bright LED turn signals and bright headlights. A lot of people like that very aggressive look. I'm not a huge fan of the over-aggressive styling, but I don't hate it either. What actually drives me nuts is that the headlight is poorly calibrated. So at night, I run into this phenomenon where the low beams are too low, and then the high beams are this very concentrated center pointed light right in the middle of the road, and it's not aimed very well at all. It's a very, very silly headlight, and it actually makes it so that I find it unsafe to ride this bike at night. And the Benelli dealership network isn't exactly as robust or as mature as a Honda dealer network. If I had an issue with my Honda Grom's headlight, I could go into one of the many Honda dealers near me and ask them to fix it, and they'd stand by their $3,500 product. But the Benelli is kind of like, good luck. I mean, the owner's manual's this thick, so it's not like there's any advice on how to adjust it or anything. I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments like, oh, you adjust it this way. You shouldn't have to do that for a new bike. You really shouldn't. It's not a matter of adjustment, it's a matter of the brights really not being proper at all. Another aspect of quality that I ran into is the whole time I've had this bike, when the weather's really warm out, above 80 degrees or so, and the bike gets warmed up, there's a squeaking sound that comes from the front axle. And I took it to my local Benelli dealer and I said, hey, it's doing this. And they were kind of like, well, yeah, sometimes they do that. And I'm like, what sort of answer is that? I mean, it's a quality issue. It only had 400 miles on it at that point. Actually, probably even less. It's like, come on, man. That's not the way I want to feel about a bike that's just outside of warranty. The buzziness on this thing. Yes, I understand with a single cylinder like this buzzing away at 8,000 RPM, it's not going to be a smooth experience, but it creates a vibration through the entire bike. And then the way that the seat is split between the first passenger seat, like the driver's seat, and then the in the passenger seat, the pillion, there's a vibration that happens because to be comfortable on the bike, I want to be sitting back on almost the crack between the two seats there. And it makes it so I'm kind of sitting on this harder portion of the seat, and it sends vibrations into my butt cheeks. It's not a comfortable experience. I did a day on the Grom last year where I was on the bike for something like 4 or 5 hours. I mean, it was comfortable that entire time. I had a really good time doing it. And then here on the Benelli, if I'm on the seat for more than an hour or two, it's not comfortable. It's not a very comfortable little bike. You do feel the crescendo a bit when you get the revs up and are able to actually get into the power band of this bike. But I don't, seeing as it's a little city hopper type bike where you're probably going to be coming away from stoplight to stoplight much more regularly, I don't want to have to wring it out. I want the power to be there right away and it to feel relaxed getting up to speed, not like it's got to be manic and scream away. Another small annoyance is the speedometer is very inaccurate. So it says I'm doing 60 right now, 61 even, but I'm probably only actually doing about 55 miles per hour. So a lot of people are going to hop on their Benellis and say, oh, you could go do 60 miles per hour easily. That's not necessarily the case. Alright, so I've been harping on this bike the whole time. What does it do well? Come on, Charlie, it's got to do some things well. I do think the price point makes a lot more sense for this type of bike than a lot of the Honda products. I love the idea of a Honda Monkey, but I just can't stomach the idea of paying well over $4,000 for a bike. Just that, because I think it looks good, essentially. This, much more reasonable price, low threes. I think it's much more competitive with the Grom pricing, but I do think it's priced pretty well. Because a lot of times these little bikes are either a second bike for people, or they're just kind of a fun little toy, like casual sort of bike. They're not necessarily your main means of transportation, so it might not be that big of a deal if the seat's not as comfortable, or if this thing sings the song of its people at 60 miles per hour and you can barely see out the mirrors because they're vibrating so much. And maybe you're never going to ride it at night, so the headlight's not a big deal. Look at that, just lugging when I'm just at 6,000 RPMs, there's nothing. Gotta really get it to come online, about 8,000 RPM. Now, despite not being too happy with the knee position on the bike, I'm actually pretty happy with the handlebar and overall seating position there. I like how there's a little bit of a forward lean, so you can kind of come into the bike and lean against the wind at these higher speeds, but then still kind of be seating upright, and it's a nice ergonomic position from the upper body standpoint. The brakes are good, very strong. Can slow it right down, but another downside for me, no anti-lock brake option with the TNT 135. That is something that I'd be willing to pay the extra $200 for to get on my Honda. And if you're not a very experienced rider, I highly recommend you have it as well. Horn test? That works pretty well. Another thing, I just going through my head that I'm going to have to get fuel after this, and this whole fuel cap doesn't flip up. The whole thing removes, so again, one of those cost-saving measures that makes the bike feel less enjoyable to use on a day-to-day basis. You got to take that off and set it somewhere. Also, no bit of storage on here at all, which isn't a huge deal. I mean, most bikes don't have storage in this class, but you think about something like the Honda Navi or a bunch of scooters that are able to get some storage in there, and it does add to the ownership experience. Oh, another thing. This is a twin spark motor, meaning it's got 2 spark plugs, so when the time comes to change it, it's going to cost you twice as much. And I mean, it's a super small, just drop in the bucket thing, but it all adds up. Then there's the weight. This thing weighs about 250 pounds without me on it, and that's getting up into some kind of near the Supermoto style weight class. So it's kind of like, why am I riding a bike that's this small and I can't take on the highway or anything if I could give up just another 50 pounds or so and be on a full-fledged, full suspension Supermoto type bike? At least with the Honda products and a lot of the other small bikes like this, you're getting closer to that 225-pound weight. And 25 pounds makes a difference when you're talking this low. Another aspect to consider is the clout factor. Yeah, as silly as it is to say, and I'm in general not a very vain person or someone who's really concerned about image or fitting in or anything like that, but you gotta admit that when you have a Grom, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's cool, like I know the Groms, I've always wanted one of those, that's so sweet. You're kind of part of the it crowd. Whereas when you got something like this, people are like, oh, what is that? And they're like, oh, Benelli, my grandfather had one of those 30 years ago or something like that. And you have to be like, well, it's not exactly Italian anymore, it's technically a Chinese bike, they've just got the rights to the namesake and everything. And then they're like, oh, okay, whatever. So I do think it's worth paying a little bit more to be part of the Honda crew. It feels cool, it does, whereas you don't get that with this one. Also, the technology suite. This is a very basic screen here. It's just your basic digital display telling you your speed, your time, and your odometer, and you can switch between auto and trip. So you're not getting a gear indicator, which some of you will be like, oh, who needs that? Well, it makes riding easier, and it makes it more enjoyable. So if you're a younger, newer type of rider, it's going to help for it to say what gear you're in. So give me a gear indicator, like, again, the Grom has. However, I will say one of the things I do like about the Benelli is having an analog tachometer. I do like the ability to just see a sweeping tach, quick glance down, and see where my revs are versus one of the digital ones on a lot of the new bikes. So 1 point for the Benelli. Quick side note, busy rush hour traffic right now, and I am wearing my high visibility airbag vest from Helite, my Helite Turtle 2. Helps me feel like I am actually seen on this bike, because for those of you who don't know, the only reason I no longer have my Grom is because somebody pulled right out in front of me to make a left turn when I was riding on it, and I was not able to slow down in time and I hit them. So now I got the Helite super high vis vest here, and hopefully that helps people see me. On the bigger bike I'm not quite as concerned, but on these little bikes I do think that it's tough for people to see these running around. I do have to give some credit, though, to the motor. Despite it being a different character than I'm used to, it is pretty happy to rev up. It never seems to complain being up at high revs. So, there's something to be said for that twin spark design and having a little bit of extra displacement compared to a lot of the other bikes in this class. So I can't really speak to longevity type of reliability for the TNT 135. If I had to make a wager, I don't think it would be as reliable as the Honda. This motor really feels like it's working harder. It feels like it's really strained when you wring it out, and you have to wring it out all the time to get meaningful power, whereas the Honda motor does feel more like it's chilling out and like it'll run for longer time. But admittedly, I've only got 770 miles on the bike, so I can't fully speak to that. But there have been the things like the axle that I mentioned and the headlights that don't really inspire a sense of craftsmanship. So I know there's going to be people who own Benelli TNT 135s that watch this, because half the time people only watch videos on things they already own so that they can get a sense of confirmation bias. So I should say that the Benelli has been a fine bike to own. There's a Yami Noob video, whether you like him or not. He says the line, motorcycles are like dogs. They're all good. So you're never going to have a bad time riding around on a bike as long as you're shiny side up. But I haven't been excited to own the Benelli at any point, and it's been almost a year, and it feels more like, yeah, I've got that bike also, versus, ooh, I want to go out and ride this bike. And that's big for me, because at the end of the day, why do you have a bike then if you're not going to be excited about going and owning it? There's so many other very fun bikes out there that why would you waste time and money having a bike that's not very fun, especially when there are others in this class that I enjoy more. Another cool thing about the Benelli is the key. I actually appreciate it, even though it feels kind of cheap, the plastic area. I appreciate the switchblade. It's kind of cool. Pop it out, throw it in the ignition. So there we are, the Benelli TNT 135. It's a bike, and it works very well, and some of you may own one and be very happy with it, and I can very much see how you would be. But there are little elements about it that altogether add up to be a bike that I'm not really interested in owning any longer. So thank you all so much for watching. If you do want to see more on the bike, check the link in the description for my ownership intro. I think we got a little winding road video on it as well. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.